Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is City Talk. School's back, and so are we. We're talking New York City public schools, mayoral control, the Department of Ed, testing, report cards, union contracts, great teaching, and rubber rooms. To discuss public education in New York is Michael Mulgrew, recently elected president of the United Federation of Teachers. Prior to becoming president in August, Michael was the UFT's chief operating officer. He's a longtime New York City public school teacher who's worked primarily with at-risk kids. He's got a bachelor's and master's degree from CUNY's College of Staten Island, another CUNY success. Welcome, Michael.
Welcome, Doug. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Full disclosure, I was a UFT member and chapter chairman of my school in 1975 and led my building in the strike in 1975.
Well, that's fantastic to hear. And obviously you've been there during the tough times.
Oh, thank you. And I also was a school board member and had to negotiate with the teachers union. We won't go there. Talk a little bit about UFT. You know, just give the viewers a sense of what the UFT is as an organization.
Well, as an organization, we constantly are always trying to work more and more with the community. To us, you get into this profession to work with children. You get in and you start to make a difference in a child's life, and you see that the work you're doing helps them move forward in life. And that's the basis of most of the membership inside the UFT. So that really guides us in a lot of what we do.
Okay, numbers. I mean, how many teachers, paras? Talk to me about just some dimensions of what the UFT is.
We have approximately 203,000 members.
Wow.
So,
go ahead.
Last year we organized 28,000 daycare providers. We have approximately 88,000 teachers. We have 50,000. We have quite a number of people, and all dedicated to making a difference in people's lives in this city.
Okay, talk about you. You worked your way up from a substitute teacher to a full-timer, longtime teacher at Grady in Staten Island, and it seems just by people I talked to and reading your bio, you are more the teacher than the union leader, if I can make that distinction.
Well, I would say it's both.
Okay.
And it's important, you know, to have both. That's as I feel. I came out, I was a teacher. I taught for 12 years in an at-risk program in Grady High School in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. But I originally started as a substitute in a school known as South Richmond Valley Vocational Technical High School, which is Mount Loretta, which is an orphanage on Staten Island for basically emotionally disturbed children. And
so this should prepare you to work in the political realm.
Yes, it has come in very handy, I would say.
Okay. People I talk to, and I talk to a lot of people, constantly are sort of comparing you to your predecessor, Randy Weingarten. And the word on the street is that you're pragmatic, these are the exact words, pragmatic, reasonable, willing to explore, seeks common ground. And your UFT bio says that you are, quote, a firm believer in building alliances and creating opportunities for collaboration. What's new in the UFT? How is your orientation being put into practice in the UFT?
Well, right now, what we're facing in the city and in the school system is we wanted to get off to a smooth school opening because of budgets, which is very important, and it's something everyone in the city is facing as well as the country. So those relationships that you have inside of the community, the teachers work with the parents, the teachers work with community groups, the teachers inside of the community education councils. Those are places where you can always form relationships to help make the system better.
Okay, but it goes beyond that from what I'm hearing. You know, there's cross-sector alliances, for example, charters. I mean, the UFT, even though it ran a charter, you know, has been, if not unalterably opposed, somewhat skeptical. But it seems that there's an unnecessary conflict. It seems that, is there movement in that direction? It seems that Do you folks it's starting to rethink this a little bit?
It's not that we're rethinking it. We've always, Albert Shanker, the second president of UFT, was the person who came up with the idea for charters.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't understand that. But there was what we were thinking of at that point was remove the bureaucracy from the school so that it can do innovative things in teaching.
Right.
But the part that we haven't seen here in New York City,
Go ahead.
the important part that's missing is once we have a place where we can experiment with education, when we find out that something works,
right,
we need to then be able to transfer that practice back to the largest public school system.
Is that happening?
That is not happening.
How do you make it happen?
You make that happen by having discussions, by doing what you just said to me. You form relationships, you work with people who are doing this work the right way. We engage with people, different charter schools. We run 2 charter schools of our own. We're a partner with another one, and that's where we're starting to do it.
And it seems that a lot of this conversation isn't quite public yet. There seems to be conversations going on. There's whisperings that there's all kinds of conversations going on out there without, spilling any beans. Will we be surprised / gratified in a couple of months after these conversations take place? What might we expect?
I think what we should all expect is that people who are in education, it is incumbent upon them to be responsible to try to come up with ways to make the system better.
Okay.
And that's something I'm open to, the members of the UFT are open to. They want to figure out ways to make the system better. But let's be clear.
Go ahead.
They need their voice involved with this.
Okay.
That's a big
And
issue
you're
that
saying,
we have.
And is that the case now?
In a lot of issues it is, for us here in New York City. But there's a lot of debate, as you know, that goes on about education.
Right.
And a lot of it comes from outside.
Okay. Let's get specific here. Mayoral control. Now, the UFT has been in favor of some form of mayoral control. As a matter of fact, we served on a panel together at Baruch on it. Let's say in an alternative universe, a new mayor is elected in November, and this first call goes to you. Mike, what's the big things we've got to do? And what are some of the little things? In other words, what does mayoral control mean to you, and what could it mean to the students and residents of New York?
There are so many great things we can do under mayoral control. We can always talk about the PEP boards and the regulations, and we can get into that later if you want. But what could we do with the other city agencies, the social safety net services, if we could bring those into the schools and make it easier for the community to have access to these services? I was in a school in Manhattan the other day, and they were just lucky enough to have a healthcare facility. And when they first put it in, the principal thought that, maybe 1 or 2 people would come in. But that's not the case. The principal was surprised that because the community is always in the building using the healthcare facility, and their attendance goes up because of it. Well, look what we could do with all of the city social services if we could start developing that safety net and bring it to basically the people who need it. And we know that the community is always involved with the school. So bring the services to the school and start making the school back to what it used to be, which is the center of the community, the neighborhood, of the children with it serves.
Is that happening?
It's not happening, and I think it's something that can happen under mayoral control.
Okay. Is the problem with mayoral control the current governor? If there is a problem with the current form of mayoral control, what is it?
Well, it's not a problem. It's a lack of vision that I see it as. We could do so much more with it. And there's the parent piece. We fought very hard to make sure that the parents have more voice inside of this. But it's really about the school. People talk about mayoral control in the general of the whole city and what it means at the main board. But most people don't get involved with the main board. Most people are involved with their school at that level in the community. So how do we make sure that parents' voices are being heard inside of their school? And
also that the students are provided the means to succeed both in the classroom and outside the classroom.
Absolutely. Those support services need to be there, and that's something that mayoral control could deliver.
Now, do you folks have or plan to have a community school pilot programs where you actually test these concepts out and then rigorously assess them?
We've been entering some different conversations in different areas. And this is something we feel strongly about. It has to be about how do we help every community succeed?
Okay.
How do you help every school succeed? So we've entered into conversations with different people about different aspects who have been doing this work.
Okay.
So there's been some interesting things. We've looked up at the Harlem Children's Zone. They're doing some great work up there in terms of supplying support services. So that
Well, that would
homeless
almost
children
seem to be a natural conversation and at some point coactivity with a group like that, which really does the marriage of the UFT and what's going on up there, or the school system and what's going on up there, could provide a boost to this dynamic change that you're talking about.
It absolutely could, and that's part of the model, because there's a lot of things going on there people aren't aware of.
Another thing that I want to touch on was sort of the question that I've always asked, and in a sense it's like Potter Stewart's observation, I know pornography when I see it. What makes a good teacher? What makes a great teacher? I know that the UFT is part of the Gates Foundation funded teacher quality study. What makes a great teacher, and how do we determine it, and how do we reward it?
You know, a great teacher is made by someone who first has to have the dedication and the passion to be in that classroom. Let's be very frank about it. If you do not have that dedication and passion, the students will know. When you close that classroom door, it's the truth be told for everyone. So we have to start with that as a basis. And then the issue becomes what really happens inside of the classroom.
Right, and what happens to teachers that allow them to be effective in the classroom.
And a lot of people would like to try to make a single measurement of it. You know, we do not believe, and I strongly will always speak out against it, that a standardized test score...
We're going to talk about this. Go ahead.
A student's measurement on one day a year, we make high-stakes decisions for a student on their performance on a test that happens one day a year for approximately 3 hours. That's not fair to the student, and it's not fair for the person who's teaching them. And that's not really a measure of what goes on into real good learning inside of that classroom. So we have to look at different ways to do this. So we have entered into a research project that's being funded by the Gates Foundation. And we're hoping to really start looking at it from inside of the classroom.
Any preliminary results, any sense of what goes into making a great teacher, a great teacher preparation system, a great teacher utilization system? Do we have any results?
Well, we're just signing up the volunteers at this
point.
point.
Okay.
So we
we're
have
really
no
at the
results.
very,
we're at the very beginning,
stage.
And we're accepting 1,000 volunteers from the teaching ranks inside of the city of New York.
Okay. Let's get to testing, report cards, accountability, and merit pay. We have to. Obviously, the question, I think the fundamental question is how accurate are the exams that are currently given in measuring student learning, and what skills should passing grades reflect? What is wrong with the current testing regime, if you will?
First,
or how could it be improved, if I may phrase it more positively?
Let's put the discussion. 97% of the schools in New York City this year received an A or a B.
Bull.
Is that what you're asking?
Bull. Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
now,
first, the benchmarks are determined earlier in the year. And so the teachers have always proven, you give them a benchmark, they're going to reach the benchmark.
Okay.
Okay? So they met the benchmarks at a high rate this year. But let's look at the tests themselves. There has been questions about this.
Diane Ravitch in an op-ed called the test bogus, and Meryl Tish's talked about the test being, dumbed down. So we're doing all these high-stakes decision-making on a faulty basic instrument. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's what we're trying to determine, but at this point, it's definitely leading to that part of the discussion. So what do we need to do here? If we're going to use tests, first of all, we have to make sure the validity of the test is there.
Right.
Now, the questions are on grade level, the amount of questions that you answer correctly, are they the right percentage? You've heard the horror stories about people guessing through the test.
Right, doing it by chance. Right. And then you need, a 44 on one of the tests to get a level 2 proficiency. I mean, without getting into, the technical, elements of this.
Right.
And also, aren't we only testing for math and reading, language arts?
Yes.
What about knowledge of the other subjects? And in fact, are the other subjects suffering? It would seem, in a certain amount of time, you can only teach so much. So are our kids learning less of other things, preparing for these tests?
When we have a system that's based, 85% of the system, the grade, as you would say, is based solely on that individual standardized test score. So we hope that schools would not then ruin other parts of the curriculum, the art, the music, physical education. These are the things that give students a way to engage in school, that really bring them into the learning experience. And if you just make it about that test, you're doing a disservice to children.
Okay, then how can we measure performance? What, if you were to establish the regime, what would it look like in terms of evaluating student progress and also evaluating your pedagogical staff as well? What are the elements that should go into a report card, if you will?
Well, standardized test scores have a role to play in terms of whether a school is doing its job, but nowhere near the percentage that it has now. We have to also look at a school. If I'm a parent, I would like to know that what is this school doing for my son or daughter? Or more importantly, is the school a good match? So you have different things you have to look at. Safety, school tone, school culture. What type of curriculum is there? Does the curriculum offer a lot of enrichments that are going to engage students?
And none of that, and none of that's being evaluated now. That doesn't go into the scoring, or it's squeezed into this 15% that's left after the.
Some of that is, some of it isn't, but the main point is, if it is being there in the learning environment survey, the percentage is so small that it's really not significant, because the people who are running the system know it's still 85% just on those test scores. And it is something we have to balance out correctly. We put forth the proposition last year where you can use the different ways to look at a school. Look at the curriculum and the supports that a school are given in order to enrich things outside of the standardized tests.
Right.
Those are important. Those engage students. We have to look at school tone and culture. We have to measure that.
I know, but it's difficult to measure, but it's important enough that we should figure out how to measure it.
Yes, and we've had rubrics in the past where we could do an analysis of a school, but it's not neat and it's labor intensive. But I think we owe it to our students.
Now, is there a literature or studies that talk to best practices? And if there are best practices, why aren't we adopting the best practices?
There's a lot of different debate going on about how to measure effective teaching. Okay, it's a lot. But as a teacher and as anyone who works in a school, you know the number one thing is that you need to be able to engage a student in learning.
Right.
And you have to make that school day very enriching to engage them. And if we don't start with that, we're always worried about the outcome over here. We're not worrying about the input that gets us to the outcome.
Right, and another thing that we're worried about, which I was just going to bring up, is, governance issues, the structure of the organization that delivers the education. Assessment of that, I mean, we've gone through now 3 or 4 different governance structures. Does it work optimally for our kids and the other stakeholders in the system? And if not, why not?
I believe there needs to be a piece on this about the support structure that's being offered to the school. We don't measure that right now. That's not part of it. So what is being given to a school to allow it to do its job?
And when you said given to a school, you mean fiscally, managerially, curricularly?
Curriculum and all of that. We would love to have an assessment of what curriculums work with different student populations.
Does not?
We don't have that at this point. We could, and just think of all of that testing. You could use the testing. Well, what schools are working with the curriculum that we bought a curriculum for English language learners who have been in this country for less than 3 years, and it didn't work. Well, we need to know that curriculum's not working, but we could also need to know what curriculums are working.
I mean, this is ridiculous. Why don't we know this? Why aren't what seems to be a rather obvious element not already incorporated in the operation?
Because the system that they built is still very immature. It's the best way I can put it, because right now it's just about tracking the individual students' test scores and not about tracking the programs that are being picked at the schools. And I think we're missing an opportunity there that we could very easily, if we adapted the data systems, we could easily incorporate.
Is there, I mean, are there discussions, is there movement, discussions between the UFT and I guess the CSA and the administration, DOE, the chancellor, on instituting this, or where are we with this?
We have had discussions with them. I myself have had discussions with them on this issue, and they say it's a great idea. And hopefully we'll continue to push this idea, because we do think it's a great idea.
But I mean, when does it get beyond idea into practice, and how?
When we have the ability to make sure that everyone realizes that this is an important piece of information that the school system
So we've got to change, we've got to change the information flow, and we've got to change attitudes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's some specific elements. Failing schools. What we do now is when we characterize failing schools, we close them. Is that the wisest way to approach this?
No.
Why not?
You have to help a school. The school is there inside of the community. And when you're making decisions now based solely on standardized test scores, you need to go into that school and find out what's happening. There's different ways to do this. But the idea is we want every school to be a great school. And if a school is struggling and you've been identified as struggling, then there's an opportunity there to really make changes to make it work better. But we have to go about this differently. You can't say you're not doing well, and I'm going to stand back here and not offer you anything, but just let you know that you're not doing well.
Are there within the system SWAT teams, if you will, of budget people, managerial people, pedagogical people that go into these schools and do both analysis and remediation? Or do they just stand back and it's Darwinian, and if you fail, you fail?
They have, each school has a support network, but it's not the support network's responsibility to go in and say, you need to start doing this, this, and this. You need help with this, this, and this, which is the sad part. I really believe that there is a way here to start helping schools that are struggling. If we have all of this information, we need to start using it in a better way that can help individual schools that are struggling to start to turn around. We've seen this before. We've been able to turn schools around. And the idea of just going after schools and saying we're closing you doesn't really sit well with a lot of communities. They're like,
because they're central institutions.
Right, and if my school's not doing well, how come you're not trying to sit here and engage us in a conversation about moving the school forward in a different direction? It's glad you've identified us. Thank you very much.
Right.
But where's the responsibility of trying to move this forward?
Okay.
Except just saying we're going to come in and close you. I mean, it's a nice thing, but I'm sorry, schools are not retail chains where they're competitive with each other. Schools are places where the community exists, where they want their children to have a good place to go. And if a school is struggling, I think our first responsibility is to go in and try to help them do the right thing. We had a lot of parent groups last year who came to us, and we've been helping them. And they've shown, we had schools who were designated for closing last year who received A's this year, who went and changed.
So the UFT actually provides some of this support knowledge to communiadministrators, to schools,
when
to what?
When schools come to us, we absolutely will send in people and help them.
Now, when you say schools, with the schools, school administrators,
parents, teachers, high schools, we have students who reach out to us.
Okay.
Look, this is what we do.
Okay.
It's education and students.
Okay. Rubber rooms. The August 31st, 2009 New Yorker and a recent New York Post article dated September 13th. Talk about this rubber room, officially temporary reassignment centers where teachers who are bad teachers or incompetent teachers or in some way deficient are placed, and it seems a bit scandalous. Talk to this. Talk to the phenomenon and its portrayal in this piece.
First, no one in this profession wants someone in front of a classroom who cannot do the job properly. Let's be very clear.
Okay.
No teacher wants it. I don't want it, the union doesn't want it.
Okay.
I'll be very clear up front.
Okay.
But at the same time, the way these things have been portrayed to some degree in these articles is very misleading. Because even you, in your opening statement, you said just teachers who are this, teachers who are that. We are a profession that works with children. Mm-hmm. So we take the tact, and rightfully so, that we have to err on the side of caution at all times. And any allegation, any sort of allegation, before it's even investigated, can have a teacher removed to a teacher reassignment center. And we do that because we work with children.
Is there a problem with the removal process, that it, as critics say, it just takes too long and is too cumbersome?
We have made numerous proposals to the city. We don't want people in these positions for 2 years, 3 years. We want this sped up.
Okay.
Let's be very clear. We don't want, it does no good for anyone. Let's do the investigation. Let's do the process as quickly as we possibly can. We've offered to hire more arbitrators. We've offered to expedite this process. That's what we want to do. This does no good for anyone in the system. Teachers who are in there want to go back to the classroom. They feel they've been wrongly accused. They want back to the classroom. If that's what the investigation reveals, then we should get them back to the classroom. And if they have to go and discipline them in a different way, then that's what should be done. But the speed here is just needs to be fixed.
You're optimistic.
I'm hoping, because it makes sense.
You come back in a year better?
I'm hoping.
Okay.
I will try to engage to make this a better process.
Thank you. My thanks to UFT President Mike Mulgrew for being on the show. See you next week when my guest will be Joe Salvo from New York City's Department of City Planning to talk numbers of people, that is. Tune in. Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.TV. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.